Studio A, here's John McIntyre.
Hi everybody, welcome to the broadcast live and in color from high atop Television Hill, broadcasting from Studio A. It's Bash the News Media Free-for-All Night. We have three major news media icons as a result, and normally we don't take phone calls on Free-for-All Night, but we may actually take them tonight so that you, the actual human at home, has an opportunity to bash the news media, print or broadcast, magazine or newspaper, television news magazine or television news show. Here are the icons, the aforementioned media icons. You're Scott Baker, the lovely and talented anchorman at Channel 4, or one of the lovely and talented anchormen. The lovely and talented Bob Bruce, also one of the many talented Channel 11 anchormen. And just to give us some credibility, since we only have shallow TV fags like us three, not that there's anything wrong with that. To give it some credibility from the just supposed to be humorous, perhaps it isn't, but it's supposed to be, Chris Fletcher of Pittsburgh Magazine, and all-around WQED kind of guy.
Why can't I be lovely? That's the question.
You are the lovely and talented, in fact. You are the talented and lovely. And only us TV people have makeup on. Chris, you have none on, and yet you have lovely rosy cheeks nonetheless.
That's because Bob's been pinching me before to get me ready. So
I'd actually heard that about Mr. Bruce, but I didn't really want to.
That's a WQED kind of guy. That's what I want to know.
Well, QED owns Pittsburgh Magazine, doesn't it, more or less?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because they have some good programs on there.
Yes, they do. Whatever. So,
we're 45 seconds into this, and already lots of dangerous things have happened. I'm very impressed.
What dangerous has happened?
I don't know. You've said a lot of just very, very provocative things. So I'm interested to know where this will go.
Does the news media have a liberal or conservative bias? Is it totally unfair and unbalanced? Is it going to hell in a handbasket? Was it once fair at one time, but now it is anything but? We will ask these three media icons, and later on perhaps take your phone calls at 333-PCNC. Let's take a break and dive right into the meat of things, shall we? On NightTalk and the Pittsburgh Cable News Channel, it's free for all night.
NightTalk is sponsored in part by Highfield Open MRI, the strongest open magnet in Pittsburgh.
On NightTalk, it's Bash the News Media Free for All Night with media icons. Channel 4, Scott Baker, icons,
What's
I should say.
Icon?
An icon is somebody who used to work at a TV station, but we're not going into that.
Some positive mental attitude thing, like I can. I can broadcast.
That's exactly what it is. Scott Baker, what's his name here? The ultimate white guy in the middle, Bob Bruce. Well, Chris Fletcher of Pittsburgh Magazine.
We're all sort of white guys, aren't we, really, when it gets right down to
Yes, but I think ofОб as the ultimate white guy.
And why do you think that?
I don't know. You've got the hair, you've got the
Considering I was raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and grew up on rhythm and blues, and was, kind of...
Oh, all right. You're a Negro.
Redding,
pardon me.
No, I'm just, why do you say that? I don't understand that,
I don't know.
I don't understand that.
Just stuff to say. Helps fill the hour, don't you know?
Helps fill the hour.
So,
what is the topic tonight, by the way?
Bashing the news media.
Okay.
Is that now? Are you going to be doing? Is that what you're going to be doing?
Yeah.
I'm just
Who's
calling
gonna
it
be
that.
doing the bashing?
Well, let's see if the callers do. Let's see if we end up doing it.
I see. Bowman's looking over here with a threatening look. So maybe it's him, but I didn't know.
Oh, he's got his eyes transfixed on some big thunderstorm sweeping the coastline or something. He's a weather geek. They call him Old Yeller now. You know, they're waiting for somebody to take him out back and shoot him. I read in a column the other day. Anyway. Oh, I know where I was going. Is there a conservative or liberal bias in the news media or in some sections of the news media? Did that used to be true and it's not so true today? What do you guys think?
What are you?
I'm liberal, I would say, generally speaking. But
how did you come by that?
My older brother was a groovy hippie, and I sort of idolized him, and I think I just fell into it as a result.
Boy, there's some deep political convictions right there.
Well, what are you, Buster? You can't reveal what you are because you're a newsman, so you're not supposed to have any opinions.
My first job in television was at CBS, where I was a flunky. But Mr. Rather sort of set that standard that we were objective brokers of information.
And do you find that to be true, that generally speaking, the people you've worked with over the years are objective brokers of information?
Well, more or less. I think you try to do that, but it doesn't mean that people's worldviews don't color what they do.
I agree, but I think locally that there is no particular, in other words, in local news media outlets throughout this great land of ours, as opposed to the networks or the national cable stations, there isn't necessarily a conservative or liberal bias at all. The bias is just toward making money, and there are no instructions from the news director and or editor of the newspaper to go out and do it liberally or do it with a conservative.
No, I've never heard that. In all the years that I've worked in television, I've never heard someone come in and say, we're going to do this story with a liberal bent, or we're going to do this story with a conservative bent. But then again, you also have to look at the fact, especially in the newsroom today, that the average person in the newsroom is much younger than was the case maybe 10, 15 years ago.
And so they have no opinions or bias of any sort.
I think in most newsroom you have a tendency to have people who maybe would lean a little bit more to the liberal side because they're much younger. Many of them aren't married. They're not. But some of them are paying a mortgage. Some of them aren't. They're maybe not paying his taxes or whatever. And there has a tendency when someone, and this is a theory someone had, when someone's a little younger, they have a tendency to be a little more liberal. As you get older and you go through experiences in life, you might tend to be a little more conservative. Whether or not that's true, but it is true that for the most part, in most newsrooms, that it is a much younger type person now coming into the newsroom than was the case maybe 25 years ago.
Because they fired all the old people because they're too expensive.
No, I just think there are more people getting into the business now. We talked about right before the show. After Watergate happened, everybody wanted to be in television, and now you have huge journalism schools all over the country.
Or even if they didn't want to be in television, they wanted to be investigative and tough, rough customers. Yes, Chris Fletcher?
Right,
Yeah.
and the other thing, too, is just on the print side, the technology is so much more affordable now. There are more magazines, there are more newspapers that have come up because of this, and so you have a lot of... The thing that concerns me is, especially working with some of these people straight out of school, is how well we're training them to go out there. I mean, a lot of them that the journalism schools and the communication schools are turning out, they're not... I don't think that they're equipped yet.
Well, is there any real training in print or broadcast newsrooms? I got a little bit of mentoring early on, but I found the trend to be at all the places I worked, just jump in the deep end and try not to screw it up.
Were you a broadcasting major or journalism?
Yes, broadcast journalism major.
Broadcast journalism.
Well, they had
You were?
barely
Yes.
had broadcast journalism when I started. It was like radio,
Right.
television, and film. They kind of
Back in like 1947? Or
Well, that was a long
when did
time
you
ago.
start?
But I mean, that's
How old
but
are you?
I think training.
He doesn't look that old.
When
How old are
Marconi was instructing you.
No, I started at a very early age. I'm 47, but I started when I was 20. I was very fortunate to start in like the 40th market at age 20. Well, I was exposed to Scripps Howard Broadcasting, which was a huge mega company at that time.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of different things, and I've seen a lot of changes over the years. Some of them great, some of them not so great. But I think when it comes to training, the one thing that's a little bit different now, as opposed to when, and you probably go back to when there were like 3 television stations and a public TV station, and that was it. There wasn't cable. And you had more time to do things. Now there's such a huge crush of competitiveness and filling hours and hours of news broadcasting, that sort of thing. Perhaps you don't get a chance to sit down with a young person and really spend the time to bring them along like you used to. It's much tougher for somebody younger getting in the business, I think.
But do you also think there's that, that's the way I came up, nobody taught me what to do, so I'm not going to help you out?
No, I don't.
You are turning into the crotchety old man, aren't
I think you are.
Did you get some good mentoring, Chris, coming up through the ranks?
Actually, coming out of journalism school, no. And the thing was, where I went, the professors hadn't worked in the business for 20 years, but it had a great reputation, and so you went through there. And I learned so much just by doing it. When I moved,
But would you require that of somebody you were going to hire? I mean, if I came in and I said, I was a biology major or art history or something, would that eliminate me?
No, not necessarily. Not if you were a communicator. I mean, that's what it's about right now. I mean, there's so much information out there. We need people who can package it, who can filter it down, who can and most of all can get it right. I mean, the thing that we're very careful. I mean, we have fact checkers who go through every damn thing that's in the magazine because we don't want mistakes. Because there's nothing that drives me crazier than that.
But unfortunately, in television, we don't have the time to do that.
Right. I mean,
You would never make mistakes, generally.
well, you're also dealt a bad hand. I mean, how can you tell some of these complex stories in 30 seconds? Good luck.
Very difficult.
Why do so many people, this is the first question I should have asked if I was a real broadcaster, I would have thought of it instantly. Why do so many people hate the news media? Why does it get such a bad rap, or is it deserved?
I think because we don't say we're wrong when we're wrong. I think that's one of the things that we have a problem with collectively.
Yeah, the correction, too, is always kind of like, we said this yesterday, so we sort of we're telling the truth. And in other news,
I've never heard you make a correction.
I've never made a mistake.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, there probably is it's fun to throw your shoe at the television set, and we all do that. I mean, and get mad at things we see in magazines. And that's part of what we do too, is to kind of provoke that response, and hopefully you do it kind of in a legitimately fair manner. I think that the thing that is a theme in what Chris said and what Bob said is that it's not so much even that there's a problem with bias in the media, although I think sometimes that is there. As I would say, the bigger problem is just laziness in the media.
Yes.
You know, it's lack of preparation. Those are the things I think that lead to the mistakes.
Well,
that lead to the
I
shallow
want to blame ownership for that, because they hire a bunch of people. They tell you to cover stories and/or several stories every day. Well, maybe not several, but many don't necessarily give you the tools and the resources to do it. So you do get good at finding out stuff quickly and putting it together quickly, but you don't have the luxury of time always, depending on your deadlines and your organization, to make sure everything is right. Or you sort of get used to cranking it out, so you sort of get used to not being thorough, if you know what I mean, knowing that there's another assignment waiting.
But nobody makes you go and read the newspapers. Nobody, you know, my boss doesn't come to me and say, you know, have you read the Wall Street Journal today? I mean, nobody comes around. Those are just things that you have to kind of take on your own to do a good job.
Yeah, it is very much a job for someone to be successful in this business. They have to be self-motivated. It's not a job where you come and someone, as you said, that you should read all the newspapers. And they say, well, why should you read the newspapers? You have somebody asked me this the other day. I said, I read all these newspapers every day. Well, why do you do that? You have your own news organization. Well, I mean, as you mentioned, there's so many different sources.
Right.
You got to look at everything, because you're being bombarded and you're trying to pick out the things that are going to be important. And it's not easy unless you're constantly keeping up on things. And that's where the big downfall for many people in this business is they don't keep up on things on a continual basis.
And it's fun. I mean, that's the whole kick. I mean, that's what gets you into it in the first place.
And it's money.
Yeah, it's the, you know, and so I think, well, what newspaper would I give up? I mean, if I'm reading, you know, 6 or 7 of them a day, and we get like 40 magazines or something at my house, including Pittsburgh Magazine, and I love.
And that's the one you give up.
Beautiful man.
And the
first one he reads, by the way.
Well, you know, they had that Christina Aguilera cover. I mean, what were you going to do? You got to go right. Go right.
Did you really have her on the cover?
Yeah, we had her.
You and Rolling Stone?
It was a good.
Was she dressed the same as she was on Rolling Stone?
No, we didn't get to her early enough for that one.
Did you get to meet her?
No.
You didn't do the interview?
I did not do
What
it.
are you, an idiot?
No, she was in New York.
Well, I interviewed her for Talking Pittsburgh about
remember that,
maybe 3 months or 4 months maybe before she hit big.
I can't get
She's
her.
different now than she was back then.
She mentioned that in the story, but we cut it out.
Yeah, I'm editing.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back a little bit later, we're going to get to your phone calls. It's Bash the Media Free for All Night, 333 PCNC. Night Talk Free for All Night continues in a moment.
The official transportation provider of Night Talk is Pittsburgh Limousine. Whether it's for business or a special night on the town, Pittsburgh Limousine is the one clear choice in transportation.
Back on Night Talk with anchorman Scott Baker and Bob Bruce and print journalist extraordinaire Chris Fletcher. It's Bash the Media Free for All Night. We'll get to your calls in a moment. But did anybody ever actually answer the question, or maybe it's just too broad a question to answer specifically? Does the media deserve the bad rap that it gets?
As far as bad rap, as far as what?
Not giving good information, not being fair often enough, not working hard enough to get the good information.
But they've said that
the right
ever since, they said that in the 20s, they said that in the 30s, they've said that all along. I mean, you know, if you look at history and you go back and you look at the media, even before television, whatever, the newspapers, the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, I mean, you can go back again and again where they've sensationalized stories. It's just part of what this business is. Now, it's more intense now because you see it 24 hours a day. I think that's the big difference, and that's why people have a tendency to rail a little bit more on the media than they did in the past, because it's much more in their face over a constant period of time.
Well, we do our jobs in public. I don't think that you'd have in journalism and television and radio any different percentage than you would have people that are good at laying, you know, putting up drywall and people who are bad at putting up drywall. We just happen to do our jobs, like, you know, out in public, where you can, you know, see the flaws immediately and call in and bash us. And we like to analyze it then. You know, right? We have these big journalism conferences where we go through all of these journalistic ethics sort of, you know, rigmarole. And I heard at one of these things, the news director said, do doctors do this? Do they have like conferences where they go, you know, patients, how many did we kill last year? Journalists love to do this, you know, where this sort of self-analysis, you know, how bad are we, and a lot of hand-wringing.
But you know, the public has a responsibility too. I mean, if you don't like what you're seeing, turn it off. Don't buy the magazine. Don't buy the newspaper. Don't support their advertisers. Don't support their underwriters. I mean, they have a say in that. Let your voice be heard. Don't sit there and complain without making some effort to let people know that you're unhappy.
Well, and I was listening to, I think it was Mike Pintek on KDK Radio, take some generic calls complaining about the news media, and a lot of the criticisms I don't necessarily find to be true.
Now, there's a guy who does his job badly. No, I'm just I don't know, Pintek's fine. I'm just, as long as, like, let's bash everybody.
I mean, people call up and make blanket generalizations about the media that aren't necessarily true. They aren't necessarily as informed as they believe they are and as hip to the facts as they believe they are when they... But then again, we're not good at taking criticism, are we? I mean, you're right. We like to do self-analysis, but we're very defensive and thin-skinned, are we not?
You think?
Some people...
I think generally speaking, maybe not you people, but you know.
What?
I've seen some media corporate leaders who have very thin skins and have written letters to editors of newspapers even recently. But I get bashed all the time.
You're talking about Gary Cozen of KDKA.
I get bashed
TV.
all the time, both in print, on people call into the radio, people call, they email the station. I have a lot of people call and praise you too, and they say nice things. People call and say bad things, but I don't fly off the handle, and you just kind of, well, okay. I mean.
Chris, have you taken any tough hits at Pittsburgh Magazine? Like that was a horrible, lousy article?
Absolutely. I know the day the magazine mails. And when it gets,
they start coming in.
Because you can tell
get
it
the
starts
calls.
coming in.
Well, ultimately, you get the calls, but then we walk in every day, and up on the wall, there's a little thing that shows you exactly how well you did yesterday by the Nielsen families out there that have these little computers. And so every day you get that evaluation in tenths of percentages.
And that did more than anything in the history of television to change television. It changed local news. There's no doubt about that. The daily meter readings.
I lived in Los Angeles for about 8 years. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I miss the ocean, and the Lakers, which, John, by the way.
Go Lakers.
Yeah. But the thing that would get to me is the blurring there, especially of entertainment and news, when you would see some health report on some rare disease that, hey, by the way, on ER just the other night, earlier they were talking about that, and they would even intercut parts from that show in there, and I thought, you're becoming way too much in the entertainment front.
Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we'll throw in a phone call or two as the scintillating conversation continues. Here is Mike on News Media Bashing Free for All Night. Mike?
John.
Hey.
Hi. How you doing?
Great. How you doing?
Pretty good. I have a question for the two anchors there. I've always been curious as to what percentage of the stories that are read over the air during a normal broadcast are written by the anchor people that are reading them.
That's a good question. I'm just kidding.
I know. I love to write. In fact, I think of myself more as a writer, really, than a broadcaster. By the way that my day comes together, I don't write as much of the noon broadcast, although I do, and the producers of that show will tell you I relentlessly go through it and even change it while it's on the air. But that's a lot of what I do for the 5 o'clock news. Is try
so
to
both
write.
you guys might end up being more editors than writers often. Take what somebody else has written and
It would
fix
be
it.
impossible for us to write all the stories with the amount of news and stuff that it'd be impossible for us to write all those stories. But you write in every show because you have to go through and you have to look at it again because with Scott's experience, my experience, you catch certain things, hopefully, and there are other people reading it as well. So you're always writing something, or if we go into a story, we'll write our own story because, we've always done that.
You mean if it's an extended report or a
yeah, but to sit down and to write, 25, 30 stories that are going to be in a newscast, that's why you have producers, because there's a lot involved, production-wise.
Chris, do you find this shocking that they don't write all their own stuff?
I do write or rewrite most of what I read, or significantly go through it. I mean, not every show. Today, I had to write a story that was at the end of the broadcast, and so I probably only wrote 5 stories that were in the show, plus I did a lot of the opens and the teases. But 3 weeks ago, I wrote 15 stories for that broadcast in about an hour and a half.
Are you troubled as a superior print journalist by this trend?
I just found out that the Monkees didn't play their instruments on the first album, so that's
That was crushing for me, too.
I'm still dealing with that part of it.
Frankly,
That's crushing for me, too.
No, I mean, it's right. Again, I really think that it comes down to packaging. That I'm looking to Scott and I'm looking to Bob to be able to really deliver the news to me. Let me know, be objective with it. Don't raise your eyebrows. Don't do those sort of things, and cut back on the banter between the meaningless banter that nobody really cares about. But as long as
it's the flavor of your magazine that makes it fun to read. If you just gave me the facts about Pittsburgh and where to go, I wouldn't read it. It's the personality of your magazine that makes that process enjoyable of getting the information out of it. And it's going to be the personality of any broadcast, including John's personality on this one, which is pretty sedate. And so if you took that out of it, then it would lose a lot of the flavor that
I'm not talking about taking all of it out, but the parts, and maybe it's just there are times when it seems forced. If it's a natural banter, if it's two people who are communicating like that, I have no problem with it.
Well, see, I think that's the art of a local newscast, is to know when to say when.
Right.
When is too much? And some people, it's very difficult for them to figure out. Well, I'm going to get one more line in here or one more word, and that's very critical as far as how much you talk. In the morning, we talk more than we do at night.
Aren't you and Julie Bologna always trying to one-up each other pretty much most of the time?
Not really.
There's a lot of jealousy, a lot of tension there.
No, but it's a different kind of newscast than nighttime. You don't get a lot of talk at night. In the morning, you talk a little bit more. It's a different sort of thing, but you can't talk too much or you lose people.
Let me take a break. We'll get to more of your questions on News Media Bashing Free for All Night when we return on Night Talk on the Pittsburgh Cable News Channel.
Night Talk is sponsored in part by R. Davenport and Associates, Pittsburgh's premier job hunting firm.
Two different companies.
It's Bash the News Media Free for All Night with anchorman Scott Baker and Bob Bruce and Chris Fletcher of Pittsburgh Magazine. But just to conclude the little discussion we had on TV news people writing their own stuff, way back in the old days, and I'm sure you guys are old enough to have been there in the old days, we did write our own stuff. I mean, in Bismarck, North Dakota, I produced, you said it's good.
But that was a small market.
Well, it was, but I wrote everything because there was nobody else.
Any anchorman in a major market in the top 20 that wrote every story that he did.
Not every story, but some encourage it more than others. But a lot of people exclude it. If I would try to write in some places, they'd say, shut up, sit down, go away, sit in the corner, get away. I know.
Encourages
and I never
it.
understood that. Some don't like it. Some want you to be mindless talent.
They want it to be a producer shop.
Well, Bob started in with the 40th Market, you said, and you and I, in fact, you and I went through tortuous paths. So
yes,
I enjoyed all of the small markets where I worked. In fact, you can work in the smallest market in this country and be happier than if you worked in the largest market in this country. There's no greater quality of life necessarily in Glendive, Montana, or New York City. I mean, it just depends on the work, and if you enjoy the work. So I enjoyed the work in Erie, and I would write all those stories for for 11 o'clock, and I got used to doing that. So that's why I still kind of. In fact, my producer here in Pittsburgh at 5 o'clock was my producer in Erie all those years ago.
She's stalking you, following you around.
No, we're just very stable.
Yeah. So you were in Pittsburgh and L.A. Did you ever toil in a tiny town?
No. Well, I take that back. When I was in advertising, I was in Youngstown, so I did a little.
So they look down. They're looking down. Now,
no. I started in
my wife is
tiny
from
town in
Montana, so I
Mississippi.
get
now there's a good magazine story, by the way. In the current issue of the New Republic, there's a cover story on Youngstown, where my parents were raised, and it's about how
John,
the mob
you read that a
ran
lot, don't you?
Youngstown.
The New Republic.
All the time.
See, but I read conservative magazines.
No, so do I. I do. I will. Of course you do. You have to see what everybody's saying. That's why I read the Post-Gazette and the Tribune Review. Here is Alicia. Alicia?
First, I like to say was, okay, just last Monday I saw a very bad accident underneath the underpass before you get to the 7th Street Bridge. They had that all blocked off. Now, there's a Port Authority bus involved, a van, tons of ambulances down there. I come home from where I was going and expecting to see it on the news. Of course, I didn't eat nothing but the same thing over every day that I saw the last few days ago. How do you choose what stories get top priority and which ones doesn't? I mean, you get the same mumbo-jumbo stories and you get sick of seeing it.
Well, go ahead.
No, but I'm just wondering how, you got other stuff that people see, but you don't see it on the news because you want to find out, what happened.
I'll let you guys answer all of that, but let me first say, that's one of the criticisms I heard in the Pintech show the other day. Oh, you do the same thing over and over and over and over again. What I think a lot of viewers fail to recognize, although we may do a lousy job of it, and that's why, is that there are updates on these stories. But not everybody's been following them, so you have to include seemingly old facts every time you update the story, hence people's perception that it's the same crap over and over. But anyway, how do you people decide
it's probably
what gets in?
You try to be efficient and have a sort of a standard operating procedure, but sometimes it is more haphazard. Sometimes you may get the call from the police about a particular accident or a case, and you get that information. Other times you may not. Sometimes, we've all had that frustration where you see something, where you see an accident, and you want to know what happened, but no television station or radio station is going to be able to get to every accident, every fire. So you have to kind of cull through to say which ones are the most significant, which ones either had the greatest effect on loss of life, injury, traffic, extenuating complications. Or like yesterday in Overbrook, the gas leak. There was nobody hurt in that event, but it certainly affected a large number of people. So those are the criteria that you go through to say, is this important? Is it informative? Sometimes a story is just interesting, and sometimes their stories are just entertaining. Those are just kind of the criteria that I work through.
So a bunch of people who supposedly know what they're doing from years of experience sit around and pick. Is that fair?
slant of the newsroom, too. Every newsroom has, and I'm sure every magazine has a different editorial bent as far as what stories they're going to cover. There's some newsrooms that are more soft when it comes to news. There's some newsrooms that are much harder. That is, we're going to be the hard news station, which is pretty much what Channel 11 does. We want to be hard news. We want to be on top of everything that happens. But sometimes you look at a big accident, if it didn't affect traffic, if no one was killed, and if it was just a fender bender, it really isn't news.
Chris, you are freed from much of this editorial day-to-day drudgery and free to pick and choose the most interesting stories, at least to you, because of the nature of your publication.
New ways to remodel your home.
Right, but
I'm not criticizing. I'm saying that's what you do.
It is a format. If I were to have a perfect magazine, a lot of that is dependent upon the size that I have for that particular month. It would have some news profile on there, meeting somebody, a local celebrity, a local person you should know, a news story, a how-to story, and something that's very art-driven. I mean, that's what magazines do the best. So I take advantage of that. I don't try to do things that I can't do. We've done some stories in the past where we've done some news stories that were breaking toward the end, and there are a couple of them. For example, going back a few years when the Pirates were up for sale, and John Regas at first was anointed the would-be buyer.
Right.
I mean, that's the story we were going with until that last day that it changed. Had that happened one day earlier, we would have had a lot of egg on our faces. But because of our deadlines, that's the way we had to do it.
Heather is on the line on News Media Bashing Free for All Night.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Isn't it sad? Isn't it sad I'm spending my Friday night waiting to bash the media?
Yeah, really.
That's fine. Bash away. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. Well, Bob hit the nail on the head when he said about sensationalism. It's not so much the irresponsible reporting as it is the sensationalism. And it only takes one horrible incident to turn somebody against either a story or a news channel. And if I could give you a quick example, it was a couple of years ago, and I got gift certificates for my birthday for Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Not 2 nights later, I'm watching ER, and during ER they're doing the promotions, and on Channel 11 they say fire at major downtown steakhouse. Well, I forced myself to stay up, which was probably the point of those promos, only to find out that the major steakhouse was the Philly cheesesteak stand at the corner of 5th and Wood. I mean, they don't even have so much...
No, don't tell me they had a fire there.
That was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
But I mean, that wasn't even a major steakhouse. They didn't even have a table and chairs, much less anything else. And I mean, I was turned off of Channel 11 News for a long time.
Do you watch it now?
I watch it now.
You know why? Because, Heather, we fired all those people.
That's right.
All those people are gone now.
I watch it now because of you guys.
This is a criticism that people have had all across the country as far as television news, and I think people are starting to address that because it went too far to one side. I don't think there's a station in this country that wasn't guilty of that at one time or another, but I think now it's kind of flopping back to the other side.
Because everybody does research, and there was enough people saying what she said that they said, uh-oh, people don't like that anymore, if they ever did.
I tone things down every day. A lot of times we have to read sort of tease copy or promotional copy, and the promotional writers will tell you I'm always tinkering to try and say, well, that's not quite right. Let's get that a little more, more accurate. But the bottom line in all of this is that whether it's print or television, it's just storytelling. And whatever the technology is, it was true 2,000 years ago, it'll be true 2,000 years from now. And a good story is a good story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It can be Jesus wept. It can be 10,000 words. It can be any of those things. And as long as we're good storytellers and communicate that information in whatever form we're telling it, then hopefully you're reaching an audience that benefits by that story.
Ironically, though, as television news may be moving away to some extent from sensationalism, Chris, your magazine is getting racier, and you plan a lot more like nude covers of, I don't know, Mr. Rogers or whatever naked people you can get, right?
Actually, one of the best fashion stories I'd ever seen was done by Philadelphia Magazine. They did a thing on shoes, but they had all naked models. It was very well done.
That's what I'm talking about. That's journalism, damn it. But
one of the
go ahead. I'm sorry.
It is. I mean,
no, it is.
It has all different sides. Yeah.
But one of the things that I think we all need to look at too is the presence of the internet, where people can get their news very quickly. They can get it as they want it, and it could probably be updated a little bit better than any of us could do at this point. That grows.
I think that's somewhat true. I mean, I have my computer at work where I write the stories for the news, and then I have a little laptop that sits right next to it that I keep connected to the internet. I click around the internet all the time. I've been online for 14 years, and I'm amazed at how non-updated things are a lot of the time on different sites that I go to. And even with that process, especially as someone who goes through and picks stories and writes stories, I still want an editor. I want somebody who's calling through and is saying,
Absolutely.
you know, give it just saying, okay, you can pick the stories you want. And you have the, you know, that power. I don't necessarily have the time to have that power. That's why I click to a certain internet sites, because there's an editor there who, hopefully with some intelligence, is kind of culling through things and giving me in that form.
And hopefully you have more than one editor. Hopefully you have
Got to
more
get a
than one
break in.
editor.
News Media Bashing Free for All Night. More of your phone calls when we come back on Free for All Night on Night Talk. So who the hell? Back on Night Talk, it's News Media Bashing Free for All Night. Have you guys ever made a horrible mistake that you really regret? You know,
Everybody
in the
makes
magazine,
mistakes
on the air. No, I understand.
You can't say as many words as we say, or print as many words as you print,
Right.
and not have a mistake along the way. I think the key always is how you recover from that mistake and go on.
But I mean, anything
Hopefully
come to mind? There was, oh my God, I misidentified the murderer or whatever.
no multi-million-dollar lawsuits.
Good for you.
Can't think of anything.
Nothing that you got sued and lost for.
No.
I passed out on live television.
No, but I have seen it happen, though,
That's
where a man was picked up after a bank robbery. Police officers picked them up. They were shot by the news station, put on the air that this was the bank robbery suspect, but they didn't check it out, and about 2 blocks later, the cops had let the guy out of the car. He wasn't the suspect, yet he was on the 6 o'clock news as the suspect. That was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit.
But you didn't do that.
No.
Good for you. That's right. Here is Marianne. Hi, Marianne.
Hi. Hello?
Hey.
Hello.
Okay. I can understand newscasters or anchor people influencing the viewers watching their station, but what would determine why the weatherman would have to go? Say like Dennis Bowman leaving. I mean, he doesn't have any influence on the weather. I mean, the weather is...
Oh, as a matter of fact, he does. He determines what happens, and there were too many damn cloudy days, and that's why they parted company. Thank you so much for your call. Here is Ray. Ray, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine. I got a quick question for you guys. I think you guys are all pretty much equal. I mean, I don't know why.
Yeah, we're a bunch of lightweights, yeah.
Well, I don't know why I watch TAE over KDK and WPXI. I think you all pretty much...
Because you're brilliant.
Great
You're
job.
wise and discriminating, clearly.
Who did your parents
I've been
watch?
watching TAE lately, and I've been watching Scott Baker a lot. And I think, I don't know why, but it looks like you would be somebody like the next guy to go national. How does something like that happen?
Well, it would be a big freak occurrence in this particular case, but go ahead.
No, I think a lot of it does have to do with, sure, there are breaks, there are time, there are places, but a lot of it has to do with aspiration, what you like to do. And I mentioned that I was a flunky early on at CBS in New York, and I worked at a big radio operation in D.C., but I actually like local news. I like being connected to a community. For a while I worked at the Voice of America, where we would do radio broadcasts, you know, to other parts of the globe on shortwave, and you would do it and would just kind of go out there.
Wait, you were a propagandist? Did you have?
Well, nobody came down and told us what to say. We could say what we wanted to say, but it was just sort of like broadcasting into a black hole. And so even as I would help produce stories at CBS, they'd go out there and you knew somebody was watching. Millions of people might be watching, but you never really heard about it.
You never had that one-to-one.
Right, and there's something great about being in a community and getting feedback and having a sense of place.
Plus lifestyle. I mean,
Right.
I've known a lot of people that have gone to network and been network reporters or whatever, and it's a miserable lifestyle. You're on the road 7 days a week.
Right.
Forget about having a family. Forget about having any kind of connection to your hometown because you're gone all the time. Anything that happens, that's not something I would want to pursue.
Chris,
you can have a great career just within a local city and do the same thing you would if you're doing national news. At one point, I think that was the big goal of everyone, but I don't think that's really the big goal so much
I agree
anymore.
completely. You started to ask the viewer who his parents watched, and
Right.
for a while, tradition really dictated who people watched, did it not?
I think it was. I mean, my family growing up was a KDKA family.
I think that was true for most families here for a long time.
But because of the job that I'm in, though, I switch.
Yeah,
I try to watch everybody just to see who's doing what.
And now you're watching the Pittsburgh Cable News Channel, and we will have more scintillating discussion on Bash the Media Free for All Night on Night Talk in a moment.
There
you go.
Back on Night Talk, it's Bash the News Media Free for All Night, and Jay has been holding patiently. Jay?
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Fine, how you doing?
I've got to admit I'm not anti all media, as I am a Mark Madden fan.
He's a swell guy.
Thank you.
Frequent guest.
Yeah, Mark, I thought you meant me.
No, well, you're a small guy. No,
But very entertaining. But that's a good example of somebody that people love or hate. But he's doing something very interesting, and he's a compelling person. If you just talk to him, he's got a very. I mean, this guy had a lawsuit that was actually considered by the Supreme Court. I mean, there's a lot of facets to him that are fascinating. And so some people cannot stand him, can't listen to him for 2 minutes. But that's happening right here in Pittsburgh. A guy that does have a national outreach, and yet
yes, because he's on a national wrestling show now.
Yeah, but it's like I say, but it's like I've heard Lynn Cullen complain about that there used to be more interesting characters just on the air in Pittsburgh. Right. And I'm saying we still have a couple of pretty darn interesting characers on the air.
But Mark will tell you he's an entertainer if you sit down and talk to him.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think he's very good at what he
well,
does.
you know what? Well, let me get the.
We went to school
Jay, are you still there?
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, Jay,
has he changed much?
Poor Jay.
Well, we used to call him Flounder when he was in school.
Well, I'll tell you, though, there's a classic example of blurring the line between journalism and entertainment, because he writes a good column and is capable, and has been over the years, a damn good journalist.
Yes,
but now he's totally gotten into the entertaining wrestling thing,
but
and you don't know what he's
that
doing.
Doesn't mean he's still
but he uses a lot.
No, I agree.
There, yeah.
I
But
agree.
he still uses a lot of those skills. I mean, he's a good entertainer. He's a good communicator. He tells a good story, and he knows what he's talking about. Especially if you talk to people on hockey in this town, I don't think you're going to find someone who's more knowledgeable than Mark Madden on hockey.
Right, and actually, if you meet him in person, he's very mild and thoughtful. And at least when I mean, we work in the same building. I don't see him very much actually, just because the way the shifts fall. But I've been impressed with him when I've talked to him in person.
Isn't the fractionalization of the media a horrible thing? Because the more television stations I worked at, the more I found that as the years went by, they were terrified of, say, auto dealers. Because in the old days, there was... they had so much of the audience, a television station, a typical one, for example, that if they made an auto dealer angry by doing a negative report on them, who cares? Because there's 50 more where that came from. But now there's many more outlets to go to, and everybody, and the audience is shrinking for everybody.
Well, this is a business,
right? And
it costs a lot of money
to
run a television station. You have to be able to.
Well, but you can't do fearless journalism on the sometimes
it's always
shady
been a very
practice of auto
delicate
dealers.
dance. It's always been a very delicate dance.
We do bake sales out on Ardmore Boulevard. that basically keeps the station up and running.
Good. Does Sally do most of the baking?
No, Sally. But Sally would do. She knows a good brownie. I mean, she knows a good pastry.
Well, man, I've heard that.
But I don't think the fractionalization.
That's not where I was going with that.
I think it's good. I think you're serving more of the public.
Yours.
Hey,
serving more of the public you've ever served.
Yeah.
Have you had advertisers cancel because of articles?
Absolutely.
Have you?
Do they
You don't have to name the advertiser if you don't want to, but the kind of, can you? Without
do they ever come back, or do they eventually?
No,
come back?
and I also am the publisher of the magazine, so I have that part. I have the bottom line responsibility as well, so that gets to be a little
So you get the
dicey
complaint
sometimes.
call as well.
Right.
Oh.
But my feeling is if we were fair, we're going to stick by it. And if you want to reach the audience that I'm bringing to you, an affluent, upscale audience every month, you'll be back. As long, that's my feeling. We may lose you for a while, but if we did the right thing, you'll be back.
And I think there was a trend, I know, in television for a while, although I don't know if that's true now, toward less investigative reporting for the same reason. Too much trouble, it's too much of a drain paying the lawyers to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb.
That's true. I mean, I think even in this market, there's a lot of investigative reporting by all the stations. I think, I think there was a little period there where they were worried about liability and that sort of thing, and it still is a great concern at all times with any news story, as a matter of fact. But, I think that's still there. I think television stations still step up and do the right thing for the most part, but there's a big difference between commercial television and public television. There always will be. There always has been. And there's always that delicate dance between how do we bring in the advertising and how do we serve the public and how do we balance those two things. And that will always be there.
I know lawyers make an enormous amount of money reviewing the investigative stories that we put together just because they're that volatile. I mean,
That's a good gig.
We have several full, we have a lot of really solid full-time investigative journalists, and they're throwing hard-hitting stuff up against, right there on television every night.
So where do you think we sit in the public mind right now, that is people who still do the news or have something to do with the news? Below used car salesmen, below the lawyers you mentioned, above them?
Thank God there's lawyers.
Yeah. Just to keep right, because otherwise we'd be at the bottom.
I think we would be there.
But I mean, nobody respects us anymore, do they?
I think it has changed. I remember I don't want to say the old days, but Scott, you probably go back where you used to go into a business and you almost arrive unannounced and say, hey, we want to do an interview, and they'd do anything for you. I mean, they would just open the door. What do you need? Let's
have
help
a cup
you.
Of coffee.
Now you call somebody and say, well, what's the story? What questions are you going to ask me? Well, what's going to happen here? So there's a lot more distrust as far as what the motivation is behind every story, whereas in You used to be able to walk in and they just would do whatever they wanted. Do whatever they wanted.
I think people are concerned about that, and I know if they see our investigative reporters coming, they probably are skittish. Tonight, I actually have to go and stand in line to buy the new Harry Potter book. So, and I may actually pop up on television later tonight with one of the younger bakers as we do that. I'm sure the bookstore is not going to be opposed to my being there.
Younger, that would be a great. If you name your kid that, Younger Baker,
there
that'd
are
be a
three.
good for TV newsman, though. Younger Baker,
three of the
California. Sorry. And you, do you get any respect, or did you ever?
Yeah, there's really no good answer to that question, is it?
You have an advantage, though. You can, you don't. That's the tough thing for us, is that we have our face out there. Even if we don't do the story, somebody may come up to me and say, "Why did you do this story?" Even if we had no involvement in it.
You just blew the John McIntyre cover on Pittsburgh Magazine that they were planning.
I have been lobbying for this man for 4 years, and he has no intention of doing it. He gave me a mock Pittsburgh Magazine cover just to mock me.
That's why they call it mock.
All right, well. Go ahead. You have final words, because they are the final words.
They are the final words. No, I think that for the most part,
I'm sorry, it's television. Pal. Time's up.
For the most part, most journalists, it's like any position, like you said. Most of the people will do a good job, and if you don't, people will get out of that job. They will either get out by themselves or they will be moved out. But I think that we have a public relations problem. We have an image problem.
Ain't it the truth? And we'll conclude it and perhaps pick it up on a future episode of Media Bashing Free for All Night. Scott Baker, Bob, Bruce, Chris, Fletcher, you were wonderful.
Thanks for inviting me.
Why, you're welcome. Back in a moment with the commentary. Stay with us. That'll be all, George.
Thank you.
Tonight's commentary. I was infected with idealistic. I can hear that microphone. I can hear. You only need one microphone up. Thank you. I was infected with idealistic zeal during my early years in the news media because I was part of the post-Watergate frenzy of tough-sounding, questioning, and snotty TV stand-up posturing that characterized many young broadcast newsies in the 70s and 80s. Why? I remember when the city manager of Carbondale, Illinois, a gruff, silver-haired, incredibly fat, deep-voiced, cigar-chomping classic Paul, brought me into his office to complain about my radio coverage of council meetings. "I'm not going to tell you people don't listen to you because they do," he bellowed. It was then I first realized, holy Sam Donaldson, Batman, I'm just a punk 19-year-old kid. This guy is somebody, and what I do actually affects him, and I don't even know what I'm talking about. A tradition, of course, which holds true to this very day. I remember when the governor of North Dakota called me up and yelled at me about a TV report. "Where did you get your facts, John?" He thought he would intimidate me into softening my stories in the future. In fact, I was thrilled that an actual governor had taken 2 minutes out of his busy day to yell at an irrelevant twit like myself, and I began to brainstorm more ways to mess with his head. I actually had a boss back then who said, "If you're not pissing somebody off, you're not doing your job." Those were the days. But over time, disillusionment set in. Bigger TV stations brought in people called consultants who were deathly afraid of offending anyone. These consultants seemed to be in charge. Declining viewership meant TV general managers were terrified of losing remaining advertisers. There was a ridiculous catch-22 consumer do-gooder white knight man of the people gig I had in Orlando. It was kind of like Boguslawski light. And indeed, it was bogus. They wanted me to look like a hero for helping the little guy, but not make anybody in the business community mad, which of course is impossible. They killed a story about a questionable auto dealer because he was an advertiser. "How many car stores you done?" asked my boss. "About 100. I said. "How many we killed?" he asked. "1. I said. "See, bucko, you're still way ahead of the game." What was left of my idealism quickly gave way to deep cynicism about the motives of those running these so-called news outlets. But time has given me a fresh perspective. I realize now I was an idiot to think anyone was ever interested in public service in the first place. What they want is the appearance of public service, and then only if there's money in it. They don't give a rat's gonads about afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted, as the old journalistic mantra goes. The media bias isn't conservative or liberal, it's financial. As with everything in these United States of America, it's all about money. We are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. Well, not yet, but if there's a buck in it, it's sextange time, baby. This is Sammy Sellout saying so long, suckers. And that's commentary. Bob, did you write any of those stories you're about to read?
Every one of them, right. Every one of them. That was good. How do you really feel about that, John?
Oh, I don't know. And so I guess there's really nothing else to say, is there? I guess we're out of BS for one evening.
Hey, thanks for letting me be on your show.
It was fun. It was good to have you. There was something else I was going to ask you, but I can't remember what the heck it was.
No, but I like that. That was a good commentary.
Monday on the program, Greg Brown, everybody. Play-by-play man for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Hope to see you then. Stay tuned for Dennis Bowman, Bobby Bruce, and Johnny Fedko, I believe, and the whole Hee Haw Gang and the 10 o'clock news. Have a great weekend, everyone.